If any of you are around as far as for the beginning of this series on Joshua and Judges, back on the first two Sundays of April, I talked about Gideon. So Gideon was actually the first, then we went and we talked about Joshua, then we got into the book of Judges, and now we are actually catching up enough in the book as we get into chapter 6. We're back to Gideon again. What I want to talk about is Gideon's call and journey into leadership. What you witnessed with all these leaders up here is they also had to receive a call. They had to actually go, God, you really want me to do that? And then they actually stepped out and did it. So I want to ask, out of all those leaders that you were just up here, you don't have to raise your hand. First time you started leading, were you uncomfortable? I'm just like, okay, I take that as a yes. I think that anyone who's going to step out and do something new and they're going to lead is going to be uncomfortable. So Gideon is not going to be any exception, okay? So real leadership, you're not doing this because you like power. You're not doing it for prestige. You're not doing it for a title. Real leadership is about sacrifice, risk, responsibility, and service. That's what real leaders do. They sacrifice, they take risks, they take responsibility, and they serve people. And God calls leaders for specific purposes. You notice that the groups have a lot of kind of variety? Say yes. Yes. Okay, good. Glad you're listening. And God is giving adequate instructions to these people as they're just kind of out there doing what they believe God's called them to do. So now, back to Book of Judges. Book of Judges, there is a very cyclic nature represented in people's lives. So we're going to, in review, if you haven't been going through the Book of Judges with us, and this is, you came here and you went, oh, they're in the Book of Judges? Oh, what a terrible book. Okay, so here we are. In the Book of Judges, cyclic nature, right? The progression is something like this: faithfulness, complacency, faithlessness, open rebellion against God's instructions, oppression, suffering, crying out to God for help, repentance over evil, abandoning sin, and finally returning to a relationship with God and enjoying peace. And the peace lasts until a future generation screws up and they begin the cycle again. Congratulations, that's it. That's the Book of Judges, right? No, we got to talk about Gideon. So now, Gideon has a contemporary, a prophet not named, and he confronts Israel with their sin. This is during Gideon's day. And in Judges 6:10, this prophet speaks on behalf of the Lord, and this is what he says: I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me. Pretty straightforward. I told you not to do it, and you did it. And for Israel, oppression always followed their spiritual decline. So this is where Gideon's at. And Gideon needs to address two things in his role of leading Israel, and he doesn't know yet that he's going to be leading Israel. But the thing that he needs to do is to deal with a spiritual awakening, restoring Israel's faith in the one true God. He also needs to see people liberated from physical oppression. So now every leader has a launch pad. I would dare say the small group folks, you had one. You had a place where God launched you into something. And Gideon's is found in Judges 6. And we begin with verse 11. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Okay, Gideon's world. Oppression is normal. That's why he was threshing wheat secretly so it wouldn't be confiscated by enemies. Gideon had no vision for deliverance. He believed, but was depressed. You know, a lot of people, it's like you believe that God exists. And you might sit and you listen to a message and say, well, yeah, I believe in God. But you really don't believe that that has any impact on who you are and where you are. Can I just say that, like Gideon, a lot of people are used to oppression and they are used to their life, and so they don't have any vision for anything better. So, at the words, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," verse 13, "Pardon me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Now, does that sound like a leader called of God? You can say yes if you want. Probably not so enthusiastic there. Sounds like he's kind of mad at God. It's like, pardon me, mighty warrior, the Lord's with me. Well, if he's with me, then take a look, buddy, at what's happening in our world. Gideon's response shows his frustration. If God's with us, where's the signs and wonders I heard about? Gideon accuses God of abandoning his people when actually the reverse is true. Just like the prophet said, Israel abandoned God and worshiped idols instead. So I think the only way to make this more understandable is I want to share one of the oldest marriage jokes I've ever heard. There's an elderly couple. They're on a long drive together. The wife sighs and remarks about the distance between them on the bench seat. "How come we never sit side by side like we used to on our trips together?" Well, for Bonnie and I, that would be the advent of bucket seats, okay? But she says, "How come we never sit side by side?" And the husband kind of looks over at her. "I haven't moved." I want you to think about it. The relational distance Gideon feels isn't a result of God moving away. God is in the same place. He's still driving the bus. God hasn't moved. It's Israel that moved. Have you been in Gideon's shoes, blaming God for abandonment when you actually moved away from God? Why are you doing this to me, God? Isn't it awesome that God sifts through our toxic emotions and hears our hearts crying out for help? God didn't listen to what Gideon articulated. He listened to Gideon's heart. Gideon was spewing, "You've let us down, you've abandoned us." But you know what God is hearing? You wouldn't be blaming me if you didn't believe in me. If you're yelling at God, at least you're talking to him. Probably not with the honor and respect he's due, but at least you're on talking terms. Isn't it wonderful that God hears your heart's cry instead? He hears your pain. Wow. That instead of looking at you and going, "You idiot," he hears your pain. And he meets you where you are. So how does God respond to Gideon's toxic words? The Lord turned to him and said, and this is the angel, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am not I sending you?" Once again, "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied. "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites, leaving none alive." God sees us in ways that we don't. We might think we know our own potential, but God sees what we can accomplish if we partner with Him. We can be completely blind to God's presence in the current stuff. God is already with us. I want you to think in terms of the name that Jesus bears, Emmanuel, God with us. And this angel is saying, God's already with you. In Judges 11 through 13, there are three important phrases. The first one is the Lord is with you. The second one is the Lord is sending you. And the third one is the Lord will be with you. You understand? God is already with you. He's already here. Jehovah Shammah, the Lord is present. The Lord is sending you. Since He's already with you, He's sending you. And if you're worried about the future, God's in your future. God meets you where you are. God has divine purpose for you. God is with you every step as His purpose unfolds. When God calls Gideon to the words of an angel, Gideon is informed that God's already there. And this is how God sees you, Gideon. You don't know who you are yet. We struggle to see ourselves as God sees us. Just like Gideon is threshing wheat in secret, we settle for an existence that is less than God's plans. The attitude for us that we settle for is, well, this is as good as it gets. We don't have a vision for anything more. And God shows up and says, no, this is not as good as it gets. It gets a lot better. Verses 17 and 18, Gideon replied, well, now, if I found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it's really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and I bring my offering and set it before you. And the Lord said, I will wait till you return. So in case you have your doubts about God's patience and God's desire to build trust and confidence in our hearts, the sacrifice here is about worship. Gideon's first response to God's call is to bring it into the context of worship. Okay, if this is really God talking, then we need to have a sacrifice and an offering. We need to worship. If God is talking to you, get into His presence. Verses 20 and 21, the angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on the rock, pour out the broth, and Gideon did so, and the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread. With the tip of the staff that was in his hand, fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. Now, I'm not going to go into the response of Gideon. He thought, I am such a dead man. Scared the bejeebies out of him. Here's the guy that was just whining to God, saying, how come we don't see any of the signs and wonders anymore? Well, here's an in your face. You're wondering about signs and wonders? Does fire out of a rock do anything for you, buddy? Isn't that great? Instead of God going, well, I'm not going to do anything for you because you're such a whiner, God goes, I'm going to fix his little red wagon. So you're saying there's not enough me doing the dynamic, powerful stuff anymore. Well, here you go. God is pretty much saying, Gideon, I'm still here. I haven't moved. And Gideon experienced the very thing he complained about. If God's with us, where's the stuff? And God goes, here you are. Here's the stuff. Verse 24, so Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it, the Lord is peace. Isn't that cool? He started out with complaint and ends up building an altar and calls it peace. That same night, the Lord said to him, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old, tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God. on the top of this height using the wood from the Asherah pole that you cut down and offer the second bull as a burnt offering. Okay, first, of course, the altar is peace. This tells you about the call experience. It tells you that Gideon is going, I'm in. All right. The second, he built another proper altar to worship God that involved destroying an altar to Baal and cutting down a wooden Asherah pole, using that as wood to burn for the sacrifice. So now, what's important to note about that is that Gideon did not hesitate to do the right thing. But it would seem that, the words from a prophet, and an angelic visit probably had an influence, right? But just like threshing wheat in secret, Gideon destroyed his father's pagan altars in secret by night. You get that? He's so used to living under oppression that he threshes wheat in a hidden place so that it doesn't get stolen. But when he's stepping out, listening to the words of the prophet saying, you shouldn't be worshiping these pagan gods, so he's doing something about it, but he's still living the same secret. He's used to oppression. He knew that idolatry was wrong. Others knew that too. But nobody took a stand against it. In fact, people were so used to doing the wrong thing, it became easy to defend sin and hard to admit guilt of sin. Taking a stand, if it was easy, everyone would do it. So does Gideon's world relate to our current culture as I kind of move towards a close in this message? I say yes. We live in a country where past generations actually respected the moral boundaries found in the Bible. Christian influence informed our cultural norms. We're living the book of Judges. You can have a high point where God was really influencing, and then a low point, and then a high point. If you know any of the church history at all, you can read about the Great Awakening that happened in the 1800s, or Azusa Street revival that happened in the early 1900s, or the charismatic renewal and Jesus movement of the 60s and 70s. This is us. That's what we do. We live through. If you wonder why the book of Judges is a great book for us, that's why, because we do the same thing as them. We're very cyclic. How did Christianity influence our culture only a few decades ago? And slowly, the respect for biblical boundaries vanished. And what are the results when spiritual truth just kind of eroded away? Church doors are now locked for security. When I grew up, I could walk up to the Episcopal Church, open the door and walk in. I could walk up to the Catholic Church, open the door and walk in. I could go up to the Lutheran Church, open the door and walk in. I could go up to the Baptist Church, open the door and walk in, and the list goes on. You could open the door on the school. It wasn't locked. You never had to have teachers being clued in on active shooter protocols. You know what else happened during the course of these decades? Destruction of marriage, because healthy family values were in decline. A rise in violence without biblical boundaries and good family life. When families are destroyed, what do you think is going to happen? To the point now where promoting Christian faith is considered a threat to secular culture. If you take a stand for biblical boundaries, you obviously are a bigot and a racist, and they can call you all kinds of names. Can you see that we are literally living through the book of Judges? And all God is looking for in us as followers of Jesus is to reinvest ourselves into the person of Jesus and the very scriptures that Jesus taught from. And to actually stand. And maybe we're so used to oppression that maybe you're tearing down a pagan altar at night. I don't know what that looks like. Sounds like something you could get arrested for today, right? I don't know. I wouldn't advise going over and toppling Stonehenge. You could probably get in deep trouble for that. Besides that, it's really hard to tip over them stones. They're not like cows. So now, don't you guys ever do cow tipping? God. Now I can tell you're back awake again. So God's call is for you, not just for Gideon. God's call is for you. You've seen some small group leaders, they answered that. They're getting up and they're doing what God has called them to do. But I have news for you. It occurred to me the other day when I was looking in the mirror that I've gotten old. You know, not just like when you get up out of the living room, go into the kitchen, and then you can't remember what it was you were going there for. But I have discovered that a sudden blow to the rear end helps you remember, because as soon as you go sit down, you remember what it was that you were going to go to get. It occurs to me that I'm slowly aging myself out of existence in this world. One of the things that I treasure out of all my pastoral experiences is the fact that I got to pastor future pastors, that I got to make disciples, and people that I had an opportunity to minister to are now leaders in the body of Christ. One of the coolest things that I get to do. And Bonnie and I, we mentor leaders. It is a privilege, but it's also a necessity, because we're getting old and we're going to kick the bucket. I got news for you. That's going to happen to all of you. Didn't you just think it's the best thing in the world to go to church and have the shepherd stand up in front of you and say, "You're all going to die"? But it's true. What are you doing about it? Which opportunity are you either taking or missing to advance the purposes of God's kingdom on earth by making disciples? You saw evidence of that here, but some of you are meant to be small group leaders, and some of you hearing me this morning are supposed to pastor a church someday. God wants you to have your Gideon moment. God could use a few Gideons today. So be countercultural and be sure to be biblical. Well, I shaved 5 minutes, not 8, but I think we're probably good. Have the worship band come on up. I hope God's talking to you as far as about Gideon. I mean, I really, really, really hope that, because sometimes we get so used to settling for less than what God has for us. But isn't it wonderful that God can see past all that settling, and He will still, it's like, did Gideon look for the angel, or did the angel come to him? It's okay. Okay. Did the angel come to Gideon? Yes. Okay. Did Gideon actually seek out to try to find the angel? No. What does that tell you about what God will do for you? He will actually be the one that acts and comes, and it might even be at this very message right now. God is the actor. God is the one that's reaching into your very soul and saying, "Are you listening?" All right, guys.